Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode here at Skilling Futures, the podcast. I am Andy, co-founder of Skilling Future, and I'm really happy today to have with us Alisia Habibi. Hi, Alisia. How are you today?
Good. Hi, Andy. How are you?
I am fine. I'm honored to have here Alisia Habibi, co-founder of Nasli Tech School. And today we're going to focus on your experience so we can learn from your journey as educators or people that are in education and are very close working with artificial intelligence. So why don't you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Sure. Thank you for the introduction, Andy. So I'm Alisia Habibi. I'm the co-founder and academic director of Nasli Tech School. Nasli Tech School is an educational body where we provide course programs to students in different parts of the world. And these course programs are basically governed by artificial intelligence. We also provide educational resources to educators and educational institutions that are also integrating artificial intelligence. And we design and develop educational apps that help supplement teachers for different curricula around the world using artificial intelligence. So we've been established for 2 years now. We're remote and we keep expanding and scaling, and we keep, getting more collaborations with different educators. And as we continue to encounter these new AI tools and how we can use them effectively and how we can be able to get the learners and the teachers to use them effectively, it's helped our school a lot grow and expand, and it's helped us help others in the same field, being that I'm a tech myself and I'm a software engineer.
Okay, so let's talk about your background first. Most of the people
Sure.
that I have interviewed in the podcast so far, we don't always come from a tech background. That actually came afterwards. Like in my case,
Yes.
in my specific case, I started all in related in humanities and in education, specifically
Yeah.
ESL. And then
Mhm.
is when I got my hands on, specifically 3 years ago, when I got more into AI and the technical aspect, and of course governance and
Yeah.
ethics, right? In your case, you already had that homework done, so you
Yes.
had a huge advantage. I mean,
Yeah.
for us non-tech or semi-tech educators, is actually
Yeah.
really inspiring to see more people like yourself to come out there and put the
Yeah.
things in order, like, okay guys, this is what we're going to do and this is how it's done. So
Yeah.
why don't you tell us a little bit, as a software engineer that you are, actually, I think that you like to call yourself like a digital architect, which I love. Why don't you tell us ourselves a little bit about how is it that you went from being a
Mhm.
software engineer to this digital architect?
That's a great question. Software engineering was always a freelance job for me. So I was always defined as an educator. It all started from when I was in university in my final year in Malaysia. I studied at the University of East London, and it had a franchise in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. And that was my first encounter with teaching. I was doing software engineering. I would do little projects even while I was in university, creating software here and there. But I went on to teaching at Kumon, and I think most people know Kumon. It's an excellent center for students to learn. And I was teaching math, and then I started encountering the aspect of learning and teaching with students at the same time. So I was learning and teaching, which is something strange because that was my first teaching experience. After that, I went to Bolivia. I taught for about a year plus. Then I went to Malaysia. And mind you, in this point where I was in Bolivia and came back to Malaysia and went to Mexico again as well, I was teaching computer science and I was teaching English. I was teaching math, science. So I had this overall experience mostly focused on STEM. And that's what's brought me to this point now where I'm a software engineer, but I'm mostly focused as an educator. And hence I have the position of a co-founder. I've gained all this experience and I've been in the shoes of educators, and I understand the predicament that they're in sometimes, the difficulties they face with the lessons, with the students, and especially when you're afraid to transition. And I think that's the main problem. Educators are afraid to have the transition to AI because they're not really secure. They're kind of secure with their own niche and how they teach, and they're not so secure and so confident about using AI in schools and in their teaching language. And so that's what really brought me to change or to focus more on education and transition completely from software engineering, which I do occasionally because in Nasli Tech School, like I mentioned, we create apps. And for you to create app, you have to be a software designer slash developer. So that's more of my spearheading niche. But then I focus more on the academic side. So I've transitioned completely from my teaching experience in different parts of the world to now in Morocco, where we're based, but remotely online. I've been able to just give myself completely to education and just to refine more of the use of AI tools to make AI not a dependency tool, but more of an assistive tool so that people can understand that we can become AI trailblazers. We can use AI, but we don't have to change what we know and what we're familiar with. We just have to apply it in the right way. And how do we do that? So that direction and awareness is what has completely driven me from being a software engineer completely to being this all-around software engineer slash educator in my role as a co-founder and academic director as well.
One of the things that makes me always wonder is that, of course, for us that we are living in the AI bubble,
Yeah,
and of course, everything related to tech or STEM, it feels very natural to talk about these things because this is the reality that we are living, and in your case,
true.
even longer. But of course, for educational ecosystems, this is a very complicated conversation to have because they were not originally built to actually
Yeah.
have this strategies implemented, like, for example, teaching STEM in the way that we're teaching it nowadays. Or, for example, teaching kids how to build with AI when we know very well that there are schools that they're still banning artificial intelligence and, in a very basic use of AI. There are others that they allow everything and let the students sort of like deal with it in their own way, which makes it a lot more complicated. So, because I do know that you do the trainings and you have worked with different schools, can you tell us a little bit what are the challenges that you have encountered being yourself a specialist in your field, but also introducing this new AI and, let's say, environment in schools? Can you tell us more about how is it that your journey has been?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. And that's something we face every time, particularly myself. So what we do in Nasli Tech School is we first meet up
Mm,
with the school. We have a free 1 month simulation program where we basically offer the school the consultation process to understand what they're lacking and where they need help in terms of implementing AI. One of the main problems that some schools talk about is the teacher training or just getting the teachers familiar or comfortable with using AI, being able to convince them that this tool or what we're trying to introduce to them will assist them, would supplement them, but not exactly take over their natural way of how they would teach in the classroom. So what we do is during the simulation program, we have to have a talk with the teacher, first a talk with the school, then to talk with the teacher who's going to be the main focus of the program. And then we find out from the teacher what exactly they need help on, what do they think could improve their lesson or could make their lesson better or give a better delivery, because we see educational systems are quite static, to be honest. Students don't know how to connect the dots. They learn a lot of things in school, but they don't know how that applies in reality, or they don't get the necessary skill that they need to by the time they go into university or when they graduate. And so they can't find the jobs. They're not standing out. There's so many people who are looking for jobs and everything is saturated, and all because it starts from the beginning to not have that right learning experience or learning environment. So the main problem has been to be able to convince the teacher, to explain to the teachers that this is a tool that would help you to better your teaching, to make it easier for you. Obviously, many teachers now use AI to do the workload that is kind of repetitive, not the creative thinking part of teaching. And then show them, you have to also show them the roadmap and a simulation of what the class would be like so that they can see for themselves that this is not taking over your teaching control, but it's supplementing and it's helping you. So what we do is we take, for example, if it's a chemistry or biology or STEM subject, we create lesson, which are like movie lesson videos, lab videos. We have a creative team at Nasli Tech School that
mm,
works on doing that. So we created according to each topic based on what the teacher's feedback has been to us. Okay, saying that I need more more visuals here because this topic is a bit dry in the textbook, and so it's very difficult for the student to visualize. I need it to be more visual, or it should apply to their culture or society, something they're familiar with, they can connect with. And this is where AI comes in. This is where AI is an assistive tool. The teacher perhaps isn't a software engineer like you mentioned, so or a software developer or a content creator. They don't know how to create the material. Maybe they don't have experience. But that's where we come in, and then we work with them to create that material so they can be able to deliver it. So we create the lesson videos for that, the lab videos, and we accompany it with worksheets, and we don't make it disconnected from the curricula.
Oh, I see. So in
Yeah.
that case, for example, you like not only train the educator, but also provide like support to the educational systems, which is actually great. I think that solve a pain in this AI integration journey that most schools and universities are going through. But there is also true that there are already schools that they already have their digital toolkit bought. They have invested lots of money in it. So, how is it that we can work with that reality? How is it that you decide which AI tools to approach, how to use it? How is it that with the existent AI tool that the school already has, you can work with that?
That's an excellent question. And that really just pictures out the reason of why we're different. So many schools have AI tools that we can implement. But what makes your tool different and what makes it efficient and effective? Well, the most important thing, as I mentioned, is having that consultation with the teacher. Because most of the time, schools would implement AI systems, but they didn't really have the conversation. They didn't really sit down to listen to the teachers to determine which teachers are very reluctant to apply those tools, to see if those tools really meet the needs of the teacher, because sometimes it might meet the need of some teachers, but not specifically some others. So having that consultation with the teachers allows us to create a more bespoke AI tool. So that means a tool where we integrate it with things that the students are familiar with, not just the general curriculum, but then we integrate it with the culture. So for example, some schools that we've communicated with, we started talking to, we're talking to them more if they weren't aware that we can create something that would integrate with the culture. Some private schools want their students to be culturally aware of their society, but in both locally and internationally. And some prefer to be more of an all-around citizen, like the IB values. If you look at the IB student values, it's more about being an all-around citizen. So what we do is that one-on-one conversation with the school head, with the academic team, with the teacher, and trying to let them see the picture of we create a bespoke tool that will complement their curriculum, but would also integrate the society and culture in which the student is in, whether it's science, math. There are many things to explore in their culture, obviously. And we connect that with their subject they're learning. So for example, math, we have this tool called this Algorithmic Atlas Math app. And what it does is that a lot of students have math phobia. Some people just say math isn't for me. Even when I was in high school, I always said math wasn't for me because I was trying to go into this extended math thing and it didn't work. Why? Because, well, my teacher didn't really explain the way I would understand. So this tool, what it does is that when a teacher has a topic to explain to the student, for math, it is very important that the student actually carries out a research, needs to carry out a practical research where they would be able to go and explore that topic in reality. For the student to actually enjoy what they're learning, and because this is math, students would tell you, I had some students saying, well, why do I need to know 3x plus 4 equals 5? Why do I need to do this and that? So when you say, okay, let's learn translations and let's look at what we have around. Like in Morocco, we have something called the Zalish, the geometric patterns. And if you look at the patterns there, and it's same in Spain, same in other countries in the Mediterranean, you see the translation happening, right? You see one pattern repeating after the other. So if a student was sitting down next to even that design or a parent, they wouldn't really pay attention to saying, well, math is here, except the person is a math nerd and be like, oh, math's applied here. So what we do with our tools to make it bespoke is we provide the teacher with resources where they can take the topics they're teaching the students, assign them practical math research with complete guidelines, and allow the students to prove what they're learning in school. Translation, okay, this is how it's applied in a pattern with the society that they're in, the environment they're familiar with. So this helps them better understand the topic. This helps them to communicate with their peers if it's a group work, which is something they need in the future, communication skills, soft skills. And at the same time, it builds their confidence to say, okay, this wasn't really hard. So now I understand why this is happening. So they're more aware of their environment. And this is all possible through AI. If AI didn't exist, it would be very hard for us to be able to reflect a topic in reality. I mean, you could imagine the work that it would entail for software developers, for example. And so this is why we are different. We come with a bespoke approach. We don't just impose, we look at what you have available and we work with it. Most likely, we would prefer to work with our system because it's more bespoke. And we try to halt what you have available just to see the difference. So if you're a school that you already have a system going on for you, maybe the system's working. Okay, that's great. It's working for these people or these teachers, but maybe it's not working for the others. Or maybe we can complement it because our system is versatile. So it definitely will complement that. No one in the planet right now, to be honest, is doing anything where you're using an AI tool to create educational material that is integrated with culture and society, where it's more culturally focused and society focused on what the students are learning and reflecting that around them. So that's where we come in, and that's what we try to make the teacher to see, the school to see. And we offer this free 1 month simulation for them to experience it and witness the change of how the student becomes more happy to come to school, a bit interactive. Of course, you're not going to see everybody reacting the same way, but there's a gradual change. Maybe the student who was a bit reserved is now more open.
Now, it sounds like, for example, in terms of staff and the students, they have to be technical, very technical, or have a lot of knowledge related to the technology that it's involved. Because bear in mind that if a school has a specific AI policy or have none, like AI policy uses, or have not even considered working with artificial intelligence, or that idea it's still in the making, we can only imagine that, of course, that school, when it comes to digital literacy, it is expected to be very low in all aspects. So how is it that you handle staff training when it comes to not only the digital aspects, but also the privacy, the ethical part, the equity, the exclusive aspects from the start? So how is it that you deal with those different levels?
Right, that's another good question. So we look at the teacher's digital literacy level. That means how tech savvy the teacher is. If the teacher is completely not, familiar with how to be able to go into this app, and now you're saying generate this project, in that case, what we do is we have the materials readily available for you. So it's like you have a file cabinet and then you have files in there and you know which files you have, right? And all you have to do is just pick a file and inside you have your documents. So the teacher is a chemistry or biology teacher. What we do, if this teacher has no knowledge about AI or anything like that, we assign particular space or platform to the teacher where we have things already in order. So if they're doing cells, a topic of cells, and they just want the materials, then we have materials whereby it's understanding. So like we have part 1, understanding and introduction, part 2, which is lab exploration and knowledge checking, and then part 3, which is applicable lab experiment. Because most of the schools, again, another problem is they don't do lab experiments and they just don't want to go into that because that requires the teacher having to have the time to get the students to bring materials. But we try to make it as simplistic as possible where there's also self-paced learning. If the teacher would like to assign the lab experiment for them to do at home, which is not corrosive or dangerous in any way possible, that's something that they would assign as well. So those materials will be available. They would be worksheets for them to print out for the understanding and introduction. There would be worksheets for them to print out, of course, that goes with the videos for the lab and knowledge exploration. And then for the lab report, there would be a complete guide and worksheet for the students and for the teachers. So everything would be organized. All they need to do is just to go through the information, and the information is not bulky. Again, that's another situation because sometimes the teacher really doesn't have time to read through pages and look at the guidelines and everything. So what we try to do is we just try to make it a quick summary. And before we even assign all these resources, we have a little like teacher training session with the teacher just to tell them if they have any concerns, if they want us to explain anything, to listen to them and to help them get familiarized themselves. And then for teachers who are advanced, they can be able to use these apps to generate their own projects. Maybe they want to customize it. We don't want to restrict anyone because there are very talented people out there that have their own ideas and they build on what you have. So in that case, we give them access to our apps, which they would be able to go in, whether they're a coding teacher or math teacher, and they would be able to generate their own resources from there. And mostly what we're talking of resources, just like the project-based one. But again, if it's worksheets and lesson videos, they still have to come back again and use the same basic where they would access the files for the videos and the worksheets. And so for privacy issues, the privacy is more of the copyright with the school. So and the ethical issues is more going about to know what the school's ethical policy is. It's really important to understand what is the ethical, what do we need to focus on? So it's something we discuss with the school. We don't just create things from our head. And the school gives us the guidelines and the points, and that's what we use to create the resources for them. And that's why it's a bespoke. It's for them and them only.
Now, can you tell us a little bit specific example where there was not specifically resistance, but it was a little bit hard to roll out, and how is it that you solve it? Because, for instance, we learn in our case, we learn a lot more from the cases that resist to us than the ones
Yeah.
that actually work smoothly, because that is
Yeah.
sort of like the ideal scenario. So do you have like any, anecdote that you would like to share with us?
Yeah, well, let me start with Nasli Tech School. Well, as an educational institution, the only thing you could do best, we are all humans and we don't control or restrict anybody. We shouldn't control or restrict anybody. The only thing you could do is show the guideline. Of course, you can put the rules in there. So starting with our own teacher staff, because we have freelance teacher staff and they work according to what they're doing. Their workload is according to their classes. So we tell them, for example, if you're a math teacher, this is what we're expecting you to do. This is the resources that you have available for these topics for these group of students. We want you to implement that in the best way you can. You build on it. So basically what happens is we involve them in the process of creation. We don't just create and give them and then restrict them, because that way the teacher would just end up abandoning what you're giving and just go back to what they are used to. And so you can't keep coming in and say, oh, why didn't you do this in this class? So what we do is we provide the resources, and we did have the resistance in the beginning. I wouldn't say resistance, but more or less that the teacher just felt that he had his own way of how to teach, or she had her own way of how to teach, and they felt effective. So what we did was we said, yeah, that's definitely effective. We want you to do it that way. But don't you think with these tools, if you could just apply it in your own way, the best way you can, or if you could provide us a way how we could be able to apply these tools using these AI systems. So then we allow them to get involved in the process, and they feel better. And as a teacher, I never like to be restricted, even when I was teaching. I need to follow rules, because then you'd have to follow a certain curriculum. You have to do it this way. But then back the question, Andy, is why do we have curriculums? They're a structure, right? But they don't limit us, right? They give us the thing that we need to cover, but it doesn't tell you that, Alicia, you go in and you have to cover this page and say exactly the same thing. They give you the structure in the textbook. You need to cover at this point, but I can add my little sauce here and there and make this. And that's what we do. The tools are like a play. We give it to you. You have it available. We expect you to use it definitely, but we also expect you to use it in your own way possible. This way we get a more creative class. We get a more relaxed teacher. And we get a better instruction, and the students feel relaxed themselves. So we're not restricting anybody, but we're open to ideas.
I love to listen to this, especially because what I am experimenting again is that sort of feeling like when STEM was being pushed in schools, remember? That it was very strong, and the governments find the budget for that, and now we have AI in the picture. So what I felt back then and what I am having it's sort of like a bad dream happening all over again. I mean, some
Yeah,
schools and some districts, they're working so beautifully, and they are really getting the point. They really are doing the trainings, they're doing their homework, they're working with how AI integrations are supposed to be done with the resources that they have, obviously,
yeah,
right? But
yeah.
again, when I'm talking, like talking about the nightmare part, is like I feel that most education environments or ecosystems are just implementing artificial intelligence just for the sake of it, just because everybody's doing it. So we need to implement it ourselves. So let's give a couple of trainings and let's call it a day. So in this particular case, let's talk about results and impact. So
Mm.
in those schools that we have and we find these cases, what was the impact back then when the teachers were doing their teaching, let's say, much more traditionally,
Okay.
versus when they have implemented AI in the mix?
Okay. Well, that's another good question. Why? Because there are schools where traditional teaching is working excellent for them. Students are performing well, high achieving students, and everything's going well. They're going by the books, right? Is what we say in traditional learning. But then in terms of there are many, many students that what I've seen from my experience, and I think other people would say the same, is Students just lack that creative thinking, that critical thinking, that thinking out of the box. They would think according to what you teach them. They would know the rules, the formulas. They would know how to pass an exam and pass it very well. But then that thinking out of the box is not there. And that's why we have all these high tech companies having many layoffs, because you would have so many talented software developers. And when I say talented, they create software great, yes, but then in terms of thinking out of the box, you would have a very few amount of those available. So the schools are achieving the scores they want. They are creative thinkers. Not every student doesn't think out of the box, but it's not a significant number. So this is when you go to a school that's performing well, they say, how can your tool add to us? We're already having students that are doing great. They're going for competitions. They're getting scholarships. But what else can this do? Well, you have people who finish from Harvard and they can't find jobs right now. So the question goes back to why? Well, maybe they don't have the right soft skills. Maybe they can't communicate. Maybe they don't know how to market. We should be all-round citizens, and that's what AI has brought to us. How to be all-round citizens. We shouldn't be having students who are acing, getting scholarships. That's great. But when it comes to the actual workplace, the challenges where things come out, things don't go the regular X plus Y equals Z way. It comes out a little bit and it's dynamic and you have to think like a doctor. Okay, someone's bleeding. What do I do now? So as a student, if you can't think out of the box at that moment, then you can't really evolve and grow in your position. And this is where our tool comes in, because what we propose as a model is where we get students to think, to critically think, problem solve with whatever they're doing in science, they're doing a research. There's something that would go on in the experiment that you need to allow them to elicitate and think about what went wrong and what could I do better. Okay, well, this is happening. I can see this geometric pattern. There's translation, but one of the patterns is completely off. What could have happened? Curiosity is very important. And if you have students that become thinkers, not just become scholars, that means your school is performing excellently. And that's what we come to add value more to your school. So with these all-round thinkers, you find out when they go into university, they graduate, they're becoming, hot topics and for companies to hire. People want to hire someone who knows how to do some marketing. So you become somebody that everybody wants. And that's what we're trying to make schools have. Trying, at least not for everybody, but for majority. Not just about the grades, but about being an all-round individual. Ability to tackle anything.
So definitely that is how you would, let's say, define the new students for the near and far future. So in few words, how is it that, looking back, the educational system needed a very, very strong steer. Now I think that artificial intelligence, and I totally agree with you, has come not only to show us what the world can be, but also in many ways has reminded us of our own humanity. As a person that has been in STEM all her life and is a brilliant software engineer, have created this amazing tech school, what is it exactly that you would say that the most important ingredients, components that youngsters and let's say in high school and of course in higher education would need in order to be AI workforce ready?
Excellent question. Again, as always, I would say soft skills, really. Soft skills. And I would give an example of a realistic example so people can actually relate to. You mentioned it. Humanities is a very important department. Now, people would always concentrate, and most parents would say, I want my kid to do well in math. I want my kid to do well in science. But hardly you would see anyone who would actually say, well, I want my kid to know how to write a story properly or to write a sentence. And there are many parents, many kids that are very talented. And I come across a lot of children, even now, they're teenagers and they can't even spell a word. That's a huge problem. And if you look at some YouTube videos of some teachers in America, you find out they're having this problem as well. And because parents are so focused on what is the jobs or what are the things that could actually get them to hired or get them have a good career, and they all think it's the STEM, they all think it's engineering and stuff, they always forget about the basics. Now, teachers come to play here, where students need to know how to write, but again, if a student doesn't know how to think, how would they know how to write? If they can write a sentence, a word or two, but if you want them to write an essay and you give them like like when I was in school, they would give you like a sentence and say, elaborate and write an essay about that. In literature, And I remember there was a girl who was so good in it. Maybe she's still good in it. She was such an excellent student in literature. She would write 2 pages that relate to the whole scene. And I was sort of struggling with that. And I now looking at that, I think it's because I wasn't really exposed to any sort of critical thinking or any sort of thinking out of the box, any sort of humanities extracurriculars that I can go into and explore more. And that's been a problem now. Now, going back to your question as to what are the main things, it's definitely soft skills. And I was talking to Miss Yadira Caro, who's a Harvard graduate. She's the founder of Hardcore Skills, and you see her on LinkedIn. She's also very talented like yourself, and she's into the soft skills. And she came into one of our programs that we recently had called the AI Visual Alchemy Content Creation course. And she spoke to our students. They were university students from different parts of Africa, from Mozambique, from Togo and Rwanda, talented students that know everything technically. They are great. They can create content. They've learned about it. They can create programs. But then the soft skills, they're not very familiar with. And even one of them was like, oh, now I think I know how, I can work with someone else on a project. I can be able to market or at least know how to communicate with my audience. It needs to be a storytelling. When you tell someone and say, create a scenario that should be more of a touching storytelling, should be this genre, that genre, they're not really connecting the dots. This genre, that genre, why? They don't see the variation. And so that's a very important skill. And that's what most companies are looking for now. They want people who are great soft skills and technical skills, not just technical skills, but soft skills, because you solve problems too in the work. You know how to communicate with people. You know how to talk to your clients. You can't be just a software developer. You need to be a system analyst. You need to listen to the client, listen to what they need, give them your opinion, take their opinion, go back and forth, and finally have this perfect system that works for them. They're happy. You're happy. The company's happy. So I would say definitely soft skills, and humanities is very important. Nothing is neglected, especially humanities now in the terms of AI. AI is already doing the work of the brain. So it's already doing the scholar work, the STEM work, the science work. Yeah. That we need humanities to complement, and that can come from students being more exposed to those subjects and doing well in them as well and performing good in them. And these are where the tools help us a lot.
Yeah. So let's get the funds back from the humanities. I mean, yeah. I can't agree more, especially because it saddens me a lot when I say a person, regardless of their age, like, oh, what do you think about this? It's sort of like this empty, shallow answer. But I wouldn't really blame them. I blame the reality that surrounds us, that are like so many gaps in this reality. But then there is one gap that I would like to address as well. You have mentioned a very core important factor, which are the parents.
Yeah.
So in this particular case, how is it that you are working with the parents? I mean, if I am a school leader, if I am part of the school board, educator, that am an AI champion in my school, how is it that I get the parents involved into the conversation and make them understand that career in university, of course, there are some specific careers that requires that training and specialization, but usually when you go into the humanities is because there are different aspects that really does help you think and work your analytical and critical thinking. So how is it that we get the parents involved?
So the parents want to see. I have a lot of parents right now that always ask this question and say, oh, did you see what's happening now? They're saying computer science is becoming obsolete. So they're scared. This was once the job that everybody was, working to get. And so this is where I come into talking with parents and saying, okay, let's assume option one, doesn't work out, right? This kid wants to go and study software engineering, computer science. He or she graduates, becomes the top of the class or becomes the bottom of the class, doesn't really matter, but they graduate. And now they're looking for jobs and they don't find any work. So as a parent, you don't want your kid to stay at home with you. You want your kid to work and to start a life on their own. Well, if they didn't have any background of being exposed to any other skill that they would have to help them as an option B, and this is where humanities come in. And let's talk about the skills. Let's say marketing skills, for example. I keep talking about marketing skills, and I think most people can't establish the connection. Why do you keep saying marketing if someone's in software engineering and in STEM? Well, because marketing is what everybody's after. Every company, every institution, every business, including ourselves, we're after marketing. We need marketers. And if you don't know how to market, How are you going to get across your product? Even if you're a software engineer or a developer or designer, even if you decided, okay, I didn't find a job, I'm going to start a YouTube channel. If you don't know how to communicate and talk to people, no one's going to watch your channel and you're going to be stuck there. And even if you wanted to travel, because many people travel now, become travel vloggers and stuff. If you don't know what to show people, like how to communicate and say, oh, this is that and this is this, or someone who's in love with history and travels and explores, the problem goes back again. If you can't communicate, you don't know how to critically think, you don't know how to problem solve, you don't know how to relate things, you just know X plus Y equals Z. You go back to the same thing, you really wouldn't do well in anything you want to do. So you would be stuck in this bubble. You wouldn't be able to find any job, and you would be what your parents wanted you to be. Yes, a software engineer, but then you don't have any work, you don't have any extra skill. So this is where we always tell the parents, let's keep option A. We're not going to get rid of what you want them to do. We'll keep that. But we also need to get them into this critical thinking, problem solving, computational thinking zone where they can think, where they can be able to reflect on other skills, where they can be engaged in project work, where they can be able to present, where they can be able to debate, where they can be able to speak for themselves and know how to solve problems around them. And this is where AI comes in here. And they would be wondering, how does AI come here? Because my kid is going to be depending on AI. They're not going to be thinking, what do you mean? Well, the tools that we're offering you are not tools where they're depending on it, which is what many schools are making a mistake of right now. They're just putting tools in there and the students are just depending completely on the tools, doing it for assignment, cheating here and there. And so the teachers have to find ways of how to do the anti-cheating and all that stuff. No, AI should be seen as an assistive tool. You have to make the picture clear for both the teachers and the students. You have to get the teachers involved because some teachers know how to use it as an assistive tool better than the system that you've implemented. And so we tell the parents, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to equip you with the second option, with a very relevant option. Why these companies are laying off workers is because they don't have the soft skills that is needed. And this comes from subjects in the arts. This comes from, and they would be wondering why, well, we have to relate it to them. If your kid doesn't know how to critically think, from writing an essay to be able to explore and visualize, and in art to paint, to color, or in culinary to cook, because some people look at, again, culinary and that. So then they wouldn't be able to develop these soft skills. All these soft skills come from that. They have to be engaged in these subjects. So when the parents see, and you explain to the parents, and they see it in the student, in the child, oh, they're like, oh, yesterday, Lani came back home and she started making some, couscous at home. We didn't know how she knew how to make couscous. And that's because Lani was in school and she was in the extracurricular of culinary, because we also provide resources to that where we make it fun. We have a chef who's talking to a character and he's like, let's mix all of this. And they make it together and they do it as a self-paced learning, as an extracurricular. So Lani now knows how to cook. And you will look at Lani saying, well, why does she need to know that? Because Lani is going to become a software engineer. But then when Lani doesn't find a job later on, she can become a sous chef or something in a restaurant and build on it. And she finds out that she actually loves cooking.
Or better yet, Lani can create an app where she can teach millions of people how to work with nutrition guides, and maybe it can be implemented in schools and be used worldwide. So, I mean, so many things that Lani can do, right?
You just said it like a software engineer. You just spoke in my place. You actually spoke like a software engineer. Because that's what I was supposed to think.
Yeah, I have been learning. I have been learning a little bit of your stuff.
That's correct.
I also, one of the many things that I fight with the parents, and I say fight, and I use that term because it's a real struggle. When we have to even convince the parents that the life that our kids, and when I say kids, I'm talking about my K-12 kids and the ones that are still in college. Because they're still kids. The reality there that they're living, and let's get it even further. When you are already a full grown up and you are doing your job out there, are going to be very different. And I think that the layoffs is not honestly just because of artificial intelligence. It's because, of course, the technology has moved so quickly, so fast, as it usually does, and we were not ready. Our mindset and the systems were not ready for it. So in this particular case, because we have been talking about soft skills and hard skills,
Yeah.
How is it that we see the future in many ways in terms of education and how to educate our kids with the right mindset? Of course, we have to change ours, but how is it that we can train them into this new reality so they don't have to experience in such a hard way in the way that we're doing it right now?
Mhm. Well, that's to get them prepared early to implement the right tools in their educational system. That's for the educational systems. And for the parents to be more open minded. Now, it's really hard for us to sit here and say parents should be open minded. Again, parents are people who tend to appreciate what a school is doing or an educator is doing by seeing the results from their kids. So, like we mentioned, Lanny coming back home and doing something completely different that they didn't expect Lanny to know, but she's doing it. Maybe they didn't visualize her doing it, but now that she's doing it, they actually see and say, wow, that's great. She impressed a group of friends that they were with, and they were like, wow, she cooked something that was excellent. How did you learn how to do that? And so Lanny would be like, because I did this and that, and talks about the implementation. So everything starts really from the educational system. Let's go back to the schools again. The way the schools lay the foundation for the kids and the foundation for the parents is the way the students or the kids would grow up to be molded into that sort of direction, to understand that they don't only have to know this or that topic to be able to memorize, to do well in an exam or a test, but they also need to be all round citizens. And this is where that IB values come into place. And it's really important that you be an all round citizen. You're a person who knows what you're doing well in science, you're doing well in this, but at the same time, you know how to be able to master a cooking skill, or you know how to play sports, or you know how to be able to play a musical instrument. That should be part of the exploration. And I think that is even elevated now with AI, because it's something that, as you mentioned, you don't necessarily have to have a musical instrument to be able to know how to play it. You can use an AI tool and you know how to play it, and it could be integrated in your humanities subject in music. So,
Mhm.
because the teacher might not be willing to take you to the music room every time and play a certain instrument or a certain string or sound, but at that moment, you have the tool if you're a school that can afford it. And if you're one that cannot afford it, you can use other methods, which is just mere paper, but you understand the tonation and how it's supposed to move. So, students, it all starts from the educational system. But if it's not implemented properly for both the students to understand what is the mission here, the mission is you go in the direction, okay, your parents want you to do this. And some parents are just, no, I want them to do this. Okay, fine. You put the model in a way where the parents don't even feel it, but they will see it. So you implement it where the student is going to do what the parents want. They would learn what they need to learn in school, obviously, perform
Mhm.
well, but at the same time, they have these extra things here and there, and the skills and models will be implemented in other subjects that complements and builds them in one skill. They become a very good debater. They're doing debates and they're doing this and that. Or they become a great marketer because they're good in science. They do a lot of science fairs, and now they're creating this product, and they have to get it across to parents to be able to take, to try it out, or to friends. And so in the science fair, they have to talk to parents and say, this is what I've made for my science fair. So that skill would be implemented in the educational curriculum, in the subjects that are necessary, that can connect. So this is where, Andy, we come back to integration of subjects. So
Mhm.
subjects should be integrated. For example, if I'm a biology teacher, I should be working with the English literature teacher somehow. Or if the English literature teacher is working with me somehow we could complement our subjects. Something that they would be doing, I could implement it in chemistry. Something that I would be doing, they would implement it in literature. And then if the teachers have no idea how that works, well, that's why AI is here now, because AI could give you that idea. You could just go in there, type in something and say, how could I implement a chemistry topic, balancing equations, in my next essay that I would have to give these students of this age, and get them engaged and get them, excited about it. So connecting that interdisciplinary subjects between teachers, and this brings us to teachers who are actually dedicated and actually are passionate about their jobs, because we have teachers who are, and teachers who are just, working because they have to. So again, motivation, I think, comes back again. So it all starts with the educational system. We
Mhm.
leave the parents out because that's something that happens at home, we don't control. But if you lay out the foundations and make the mission clear, the objective clear, try to do something to motivate the teachers. And this is where we come about professional development again. Many teachers don't have these professional developments. pay the teachers properly, allow teachers who are doing really well. Let's have a milestone. Okay, this teacher has done so well. Let's promote her, go to this conference. She learns from other people, like the one in Switzerland right now, where you go in Geneva and you learn from others. And so I think having a set model is important, but then this is a very far reality, unfortunately, at the moment, because many schools, you would come here and speak to them about this. We speak to them about it, but they don't really see the vision until you try to implement it in the way you can. They start to see the results and they'll be like, okay, maybe we can try this, And then you do it to the best you can. I think out of 100%, the best you can go, maybe a 60, 70%. But I think as we keep going on into the future, as AI keeps improving, I think people start to see more of the picture. And then just getting that, that result year after year would also speak for itself. So, yeah. And that's
Yeah,
really
but
it.
unfortunately, we know that the systems that we're living in are like those clothes that they don't fit you anymore, but you're
Yeah.
sort of like forced to use because we don't
Yes.
have, anything else to pick up from our closets,
Yes.
right? So there you go. That's an analogy that I use very often, basically because that is what is happening, that is what is going on,
Yeah.
not to mention budgets and the resistance about it. But of course, we are trying to figure it out, especially
Yes.
because for me, honestly, I'm more like a positivist in many cases because I see when there is hardship, I honestly see possibilities where there is something where people say no. I try to go around the block and say like,
Yes.
why no? Why
Yes.
is it that we cannot do it? What is your foundation for that, right? Before we go, what is your top advice for schools, parents, and educators out there that are just starting out or are in their way?
I would say start small and be realistic. So, as an educational body or educational institution or educator, look at what you can possibly do realistically. Like, we bring you this model. Okay, this is what we can do. We see that this and this, for example, let's say in a school, they notice that one teacher is really clinging towards trying to implement new strategies in the classroom, really doesn't have the skill to be able to create the materials, to be able to implement it. And then we have other teachers that are not willing to implement any sort of AI strategy in the classroom. They're comfortable with what they have and they're okay with it. So you don't impose to cause unhappiness. This brings again about why you need to have the right soft skills, because you need to be able to be emotionally intelligent to fill your environment and to know when you need to do things and how. So what you do is start small, take the teachers that are motivated, willing to implement this new educational model, let them do it in a very slow pace. It's a pilot method. Implement it. Let us see the results. Let the parents see the results. And maybe the other teachers in the background that are not willing and reluctant, as they see positive results come in, which obviously they will, it will take a bit of patience, but they will, then they start to get motivated and maybe go behind the scene and say, how could I, implement such a thing in that? And then you get that implemented in their own, in their own structure, in their own model where they're not feeling restricted. So I think going small, taking it easy, not being, I think it's being over ambitious where the problem starts again. Don't spend too much. Don't be over ambitious and be like, no, everything's going to be AI now. Everybody needs to do this. Don't be authoritative. And this is where, again, Andy, goes back to the person actually handling these educational institutions, if they have the right soft skills themselves, if they got it from the, from the base. And that's why it's really important to teach kids these soft skills, this way of feeling what's around you, emotional intelligence, communication. So I think going slow and being realistic. Don't talk too much, act more. Look at your environment, see who needs it, try it out, let others see. If the results are coming in, then others would want to implement. Parents would be happy, and the word spreads. And all of a sudden, this school that was never implementing AI totally is now having AI throughout its own dynamic in different ways, implemented in different ways. So I think that's how we should go.
Well, everybody, Alisia Habibi, co-founder of Nasli Tech School. Thank you so much for your time, for sharing your journey, your wisdom. We are going, once that we share this episode, we are going to share it with all your information. So if you want to contact Alisia, please do it. She is an amazing human being. She is a brilliant educator and software engineer. So let's keep on learning from each other. So let's keep this adventure of entering this world with artificial intelligence together, but let's do it responsibly and ethically. Thank you, Alisia, for your time.
Thank you, Andy.
Everybody.
It was nice to be here. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. This is a great podcast. I think is a great move. It's very much needed. And I think what Andy and her team are doing are excellent. Again, I'm not being promoted to say this. I'm saying this from myself.
Thank you.
So thank you so much, Andy.
Thank you very much. And everybody, we'll see you in the next episode. Take care.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.